Good morning, brethren, and welcome to our bi-weekly program entitled A Glance at the Word, which is broadcast live on Facebook every Monday and every Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. West Africa time, which is GMT +1. Today is Wednesday, the 25th of August 2021, and we are going to continue with the same topic that we started on Monday, the 23rd of August, and which is entitled The Blessed Place of Africa in God's Plan for Humanity. And this is then part 2. On Monday, you remember we especially spent all our time correcting one great mistake that has been instilled in the hearts of thousands of millions of people around the world, including Africans and black people. This mistake was in fact a big lie that was invented by people who had real interest to tread on blacks and on Africans and subdue them. For many centuries, and this still continues nowadays, unfortunately, many people have been led to believe that blacks and Africans had been perpetually cursed by Noah through Ham to be slaves and bond servants. This, of course, is totally wrong. It is totally false. And we demonstrated that on Monday. It's true that blacks and Africans are descendants of Ham. Yet Ham had 4 sons: Cush, Put, Mizraim, and Canaan. Noah only cursed Canaan, while blacks and Africans are rather descendants of Cush. Thus, it's Canaan's descendants who have inherited the generational curse of bondage and slavery, not Cush's descendants. This means that blacks and Africans are not a cursed people, and Africa is not a cursed continent either. Today we are going to see how much God values Africa in his plan for humanity. Let's first read Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 and 14. Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 and 14. Let me repeat it again. Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 and 14. Then he said to Abram, "Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them for 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterward they shall come out with great possessions." You know, God had promised Abraham a large descendant. Yet by that time, Abraham had no child at all. Nevertheless, God told him that his descendants, whom he didn't have at all, would go to a land that is not their land and serve the people of that land for 400 years. And after those 400 years, they would go out of that land with great possessions and settle in their own land that God has promised to give them. So later on, Abraham begot Isaac, and Isaac begot Jacob. I'm speaking like it is written in the Bible. Yeah, it's a biblical language. Abraham begot Isaac, and Isaac begot Jacob, whom God called Israel. So Jacob fathered 12 sons, among whom Joseph, who was sold by his own brothers for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who then took him down to Egypt, that is, to Africa. Let's now read the rest of the story in Genesis chapter 45. Genesis chapter 45, verses 4 to 8. Genesis chapter 45, verses 4 to 8. And Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near to me." So they came near. Then he said, "I am Joseph your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now, don't therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now, it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt." So you see, as we read, there was a great famine in the whole world. There was food nowhere in the world except in Egypt, except in Africa. God, who of course knows the future, since he is the master of times, God then knew that there would be a terrible 7-year famine on the earth. Thus, God sent Joseph to Egypt, which is in Africa, in order to save Jacob and his descendants from dying of hunger. Indeed, while Joseph was already in Egypt, God revealed to him through a dream that he put in Pharaoh's mind that there would be 7 years of great famine following the next 7 years of abundance. And God inspired Joseph what to do to better prepare for that coming famine. This made it possible for Egypt in Africa to be the only country in the world to still have food, and enough food to sell to anyone who could afford buying some. If God didn't send Joseph to Egypt, there would be food nowhere in the world. Thus, Africa was the only land where there was still food. This means that to save Jacob and his descendants from the terrible famine, God had to send Jacob's son Joseph to Africa. Africa thus became a food provider and lifesaver for Jacob and his family. This is what helped preserve the life of Jacob and his family, and preserve the descendants of Jacob. Thus, to spare the life of Jacob and his family, God used Africa. What a great blessing to be a lifesaver and to be used by God. Now let's read the next chapter. Genesis chapter 46, verses 2 and 3. Genesis chapter 46, verses 2 and 3. Then God spoke to Israel in the visions of the night and said, "Jacob, Jacob." And he said, "Here I am." So he said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. As we said, to spare the life of Jacob and his descendants from death by starvation, God didn't only make it possible for Jacob's children to go to Africa and buy food. God decided to make Jacob and his descendants to go and settle there in Africa and have plenty of food for the rest of the time of famine and even beyond. Thus, Jacob and his family had to eat their food every day free of charge for the rest of the time of famine and beyond. But that wasn't all. And certainly that wasn't the most important thing. What was actually most important is the fact that God had promised Jacob to become a nation. Yet Jacob was still only a family. He was not yet a nation. Thus God had to make Jacob become a nation for his promise to Jacob to be fulfilled. And to make Israel, Israel is Jacob's name, to make Israel become a great nation, God sent them to Egypt. He sent Jacob and his descendants to Egypt, that is, to Africa. So God wanted, or God needed to have a people that would fully belong to him, and from which, or from whom, he would make his son Jesus come down to earth and bring redemption and salvation to mankind. That nation had to descend from Jacob. That nation had to be Israel. And he wanted that nation to be particularly great. But by that time of the great global famine, that nation didn't exist. For this great nation to be formed, for Israel to become a great nation, God had to use Africa once more. So it was to Africa that God sent Israel and his children for them to become a great nation. A nation from which the Messiah would come. What a blessing for Africa. Now let's go to Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 to 15. Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 to 15. Matthew chapter 2, 13 to 15. Now, when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, take this young child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I bring you word. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt I called my son. You see, when Jesus the Messiah was born to the nation of Israel, of course the kingdom of darkness wasn't happy at all. The kingdom of darkness was not comfortable with the coming of Jesus Christ into this earth. So the kingdom of darkness didn't want humanity to be saved. Thus they decided to kill Jesus before he could fulfill his mission as the Messiah. And once more, God will use Africa to spare the life of Jesus. He sent Jesus and his parents to Egypt, that is to Africa. And that is where they hid till the death of King Herod, who represented the kingdom of darkness. So once more, God used Africa for his plan of redemption. Let's read Luke chapter 23. Luke chapter 23, verse 26. Luke chapter 23, verse 26. Now as they led him away, they laid hold of a certain man, Simon, a Cyrenian, who was coming from the country, and on him they laid the cross that he might bear it after Jesus. So now Jesus has grown up. Jesus has taught everybody. He has taught repentance. He has taught salvation. And now he was about to be glorified. He was about to die on the cross at Calvary to complete his mission. And once more, God had to make use of Africa for the redemption mission to be completed. So Jesus had to carry his own cross to Calvary, where he would be crucified on top of the Mount of Olives. Yet, bruised as he was, you can easily imagine that he couldn't carry that cross all alone. The cross was heavy, very heavy. So he actually needed help to carry his cross. But no one all around helped him carry that cross. And for this help to take place, God used an African from Cyrene. Cyrene is present-day Libya, and Libya is in Africa, as you know. So once more, God has to use Africa in that plan of redemption, in that plan of salvation. And let's end our reading this morning with Isaiah chapter 19. Isaiah chapter 19, verses 23 to 25. Isaiah chapter 19, verses 23 to 25. In that day, there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria, and the Assyrian will come into Egypt, and the Egyptian into Assyria, and the Egyptians will serve with the Assyrians. In that day, Israel will be one of three with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the land, whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed is Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance. So we have now come to the times of the end, the times when God is about to openly manifest his blessing over Africa. Yet this blessing can only be manifested if Africa accepts to partner with Israel and to partner with Arab countries, here represented by Assyria. Thus, in the times of the end, Africa and Arab countries will join Israel and will all together worship God, serve God, be in the service of the Lord. And this will be a great visible blessing for Africa. And that time, God will actually manifest his blessing for Africa. So you see, even at the time of the end, for the redemption plan of God to be concluded, before the church is raptured, Africa will still be used, because Africa will be joined to Arab countries and to Israel to make the plan of God be completed, the plan of salvation and redemption to be completed on earth. This is the blessed place of Africa in God's plan for humanity. God bless you abundantly beyond all your expectations.